invite you to sing along to I Am Light. I am light, 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 I am light. I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in my head. I am not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light. 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 I'm not the mistakes that I have made or any of the things that cause me pain. I am not the pieces of the dream I left behind. I am light. 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 I am light.
Good morning. Welcome to the Westside Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm Lisa Reitzes, a member of the worship team, and it is my great joy to be with you this day, along with our guest speaker, the Reverend Alex Jensen. Liz Bucklew is our music leader today, along with John Hansen, Marion Key, and Ellen Wanless will bring us our music today. Amy Schiffelbein is lighting our chalice, and I will be sharing our time for all ages. Henry Sikora and Nate Mesnard are our tech experts, bringing us in the sanctuary together with those joining us remotely. And for the gifts of all these folks, we are grateful. It is a blessing to be able to worship together and to be here with all of you today. If you're with us for the first time, and I think I see some new faces, it's wonderful. First time in a while coming back, welcome. We're so glad you're here to share in this time, to make some space in your life, to attend to your heart and your spirit, to come together in community. Please visit our website or scan the QR code and the card in the pews to fill out a Getting to Know You welcome form so that we can send you our weekly electronic newsletter, The Westside Week, which is full of information about upcoming worship services and other congregational activities, both in person and online. Everyone, let's gather after the service for conversation and community downstairs in the social hall so that we can catch up with each other and greet newcomers on this bright midsummer day. We gather today from many locations, and we take this moment to particularly acknowledge that our congregation resides on the traditional territory of the Duwamish people. In this acknowledgement, we recognize the Duwamish heritage imbued in the mountains, valleys, waterways, and shorelines that surround us all. May we nurture our relationships with our coastal Salish neighbors, especially the Duwamish people, and our shared responsibilities to this place. Let's take a moment to offer humble respect for this place and its peoples and renew our commitments to the work of authentic reconciliation. So, whoever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever the color of your skin, whoever and however you love, however your body moves and your brain works, however you identify, you are welcome in this faith community. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition has no test of faith, no creed or oath to swear. We have instead the promises we make to one another, commitments we make to healing a hurting world within and beyond our walls. It is so good to see you all today, especially as the sanctuary is now a mask optional space, and I hope you saw that decision by the board. Thank you so much. It is really great to see people's faces. So let's take a moment to greet those around you in any way that feels safe, distance, close, a smile, a wave, an elbow bump. Say hello. Good morning. Glad you're here.
It's kind of wild that it's 1:30 in Michigan.
I know. Yeah, I know.
I'm in church after lunch.
Exactly. Anytime at all. Great conversations that can continue after the service. So, as our visiting speaker, we're delighted to have with us today the Reverend Alex Jensen, who goes by he, him pronouns, who is the senior minister at the UU congregation of Grand Traverse in Traverse City, Michigan. You might get a picture of Reverend Alex there. Originally from the San Francisco Bay Area and a close friend and former seminary classmate of Reverend Carter's at Harvard, Reverend Alex enjoys experiencing Unitarian Universalism across the country in other congregations. He is passionate about cultivating beloved community in his ministry and life. In his free time, he enjoys cooking and going on long hikes through nature. Thank you. And you will get to see Reverend Alex eventually, piped in live. Our opening words this morning are adapted from an invocation by the Reverend Sarah Stewart. Bring who you are as you enter our church this morning. Bring your best self and your struggling self. Bring your mistakes and your triumphs. Bring your shortcomings and your recommitment to good. Bring yourself here and open your heart to beauty, to truth, to what we experience as sacred and lovely. In this congregation, we strive to walk together on the peaceable way, learning to listen across our differences, to bridge across all that separates one from another. We try, we will fall short, but held in love, we will try again. We come together this morning to raise our voices in song, to be inspired by words and silences, to remember our promises and vow to live by them once again. We come together to create this loving community. In each week's service, we invite a member of our congregation to light the chalice of our shared Unitarian Universalist faith. Today, our chalice lighter is Amy Schiffelbein. We have asked our chalice lighters to respond to the question, what gives you hope? Amy?
Good morning. I didn't even think about how these words might align with the opening words, but I was noticing that as Lisa read those words. By definition, hope is an expectation of a desired outcome to happen and change for the better. And when I think of hope, I also think of the duality between pain and suffering, to the purpose it serves in bringing us closer to that which we can grow into personally, and also that which we can grow into collectively, just to the best versions of ourselves and humanity. And there's definitely been periods in my life where I've gone into the darkness and even welcomed it. And though the meaning of what I'm in might not be clear at the time, I trust in the process and myself, and I can access hope that there's learning and growth available in that. And for me, hope is seeing my community come through a pandemic, and some of us a little burned out with little to give, knowing that what's arising is letting go of things that no longer serve us and finding new perspectives. And in my work as a therapist, I see clients holding pain and facing down really difficult systems of oppression, just in this way of separating us from ourselves. And yet, tapping into power and joy and inner knowing. So hope to me is people coming together however they show up, with not only the positive, but with darkness and pain, and showing up authentically themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. So as Amy lights our chalice, please join me in speaking the words of our congregation's affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship. Thus do we covenant with one another. Thank you.
Our first congregational hymn today is number 66, and the words will be behind me as well. But when the summer sun is shining, I invite you to stand in body or spirit. And speaking of summer, I spent many of my summers near Traverse City, so a special welcome to our guests. My mother lives in northern Michigan in a little village called Eastport on the way to Charlevoix, and so I've been to Traverse City, a beautiful place in the world, many times. Please rise in body or spirit for when the summer sun is shining.
Is full of beauty, hopes and
Thank you. And it is now our time for all ages, and I'm excited to share today's story. So normally I would invite people of any age who wanted to see me or hear me better down to sit on the floor, but I think I'm going to stay here. You stay there, I'll stay here. Okay, good. But while we get ready for that great story, let me tell you about the religious exploration activities going on this morning. Today, our Director of Religious Exploration, good grief, I'm going to try that again. Today, our Director of Religious Exploration, Jade Wild, who's in the back there, and RE teacher Jeanette Hitch will lead a group on an adventure to Lincoln Park for RE activities if there's anybody who wants to go with them. Ages 5 through high school, along with parents, are invited to join them after the story. The nursery, if there's anybody I've not seen yet, but somebody walks in, the nursery is open for infants through preschool. Okay, our story today is called How Spider-Woman Created the World, which comes from this book, Our 7 Principles in Story and Verse by Kenneth Collier, a UU minister. This story connects to the 7th principle of Unitarian Universalism. Anybody know what that one is? Web thing. Yeah, interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. We are in a time of spiders here in Seattle. It always comes every time around this time. Not everybody loves spiders. Not everybody really likes them. But in many cultures, and Reverend Collier grew on sources from a variety of world cultures, spiders are regarded as wise and creative beings, and particularly the architects of the web. And so that is the nature of his story, which he wrote, as he said, inspired by many cultural traditions. How Spider-Woman Created the World. There are many stories about how the world was created, stories that range from scientific accounts to mythology. I want to tell you a myth. I won't tell you what happened, but it might tell you about how to live in this wonderful world, for that is why people tell myths. Way, way back, a long time ago, before there was a universe, Spider-Woman went wandering up and down, looking for something. She was lonely and wanted company, but there was no company, for she was alone. All there was, all that she could find, was a huge mountain. Some say this was Mount Tamalpais, and others think it was a mountain in the Black Hills. Still others say it was Mount Zion, or maybe it was in the Himalayas, Tibet, or Mount Kilimanjaro. It doesn't matter which mountain it was. She went up on this mountain and sat down to think. Suddenly, she had an idea. One thing everyone knows about Spider-Woman is that she is a weaver. And so she decided to set up her loom on top of the mountain. She strung up the yarn for the warp, and it took her a long time, for she wanted this weaving to be something special and very long and beautiful. And when she got to the loom set up, she took up her shuttle and began to weave. And as she wove, something amazing happened. Every time one thread crossed another, a star appeared. And before long, she had woven thousands and thousands of stars into her weaving, and each one was tied to every other one in the web. Then she stopped and looked at it. It shone and sparkled and was very beautiful, but it was not quite what she wanted, so she decided she would do a little more with this web of stars. She chose one star that happened to have some planets circling around it. And she chose one of these planets that had bright blue oceans and sparkling white clouds, and set up her loom again, right there on that planet. And she began to weave again. This time as she wove, whenever one thread crossed another, a living thing appeared. She wove roses and pansies and carnations into this world. She wove fruit trees and nut trees and great redwoods. She wove all manner of birds and fish and insects into her web. She wove deer and buffalo and coyotes into it, and all of the animals. And every one of these living things was connected to each other thing in her weaving. Then she stopped weaving to look at it. It was very beautiful and very full, yet it was still not finished. There was still something missing, so she started to weave yet another time, a third time. This time when she wove, the crossing threads created human beings, men and women and children and all in between, all of us. And each human being that she wove into her great web was connected to every other thing, to the other animals, to the plants, the trees and flowers, to the mountains and seas and deserts, even to the distant stars. Every human being, and indeed everything that Spider-Woman wove into her great web, is connected to every other thing. And it is all beautiful and sacred. And you know, because every day someone is born, and every day a new flower opens somewhere, and a tree sprouts, and a new animal is born, Spider-Woman must still be weaving. And that is our story for today. And I'm grateful not to be sitting on the stairs. So, there may be some folks who are going to go with Jade, or maybe not. We're all going to stay here. But regardless, we're all going to sing together as you go. In a moment, we will engage in a collective act of generosity known as our offering, when we take time to actively support Westside UU congregation and its many ministries with our gifts by text, check, or cash. Each month, we choose a community organization to share 1/3 of our undesignated offering gifts, that is, those donations not designated as your pledge contributions. For the month of July, our community giving recipient is Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund. There we go. In 2014, the Olympia, Washington monthly meeting of the Religious Society of Friends, the Quakers, established Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund to aid LGBTQ+ Ugandans who were fleeing their homeland for their lives and safety. As you may know, in May of this year, Uganda again passed one of the world's harshest anti-gay laws against the LGBTQ+ population and those who help them. The law punishes same-sex acts with life imprisonment and the death penalty for certain homosexual activity. Helpers also face long prison sentences. With funds provided through the Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund, Olympia Friends and their supporters have moved about 3,000 people out of Uganda to safe places at a cost of approximately $100 for each person. We are called to help provide financial support to this fund to assist the rising number of endangered LGBTQ+ people who are desperate to escape this draconian law that continues to terrorize them. You can find out more information about this organization at their website, which is in the Westside Week announcement. I encourage you to go check it out, figure out ways that we can help, starting now. Now, because our Sunday worship schedule is now twice monthly, there are fewer Sunday opportunities to extend our generosity to our community partners in this way. Please consider increasing your contribution in each service or go directly to the website and make a donation so we can continue to support the work of these worthy organizations. You can give by text using the information on the screen. For folks in the sanctuary who prefer to share your gifts by cash or check, the greeters will move among us shortly. If you'd like the gift to be recorded as coming from you, please use one of the envelopes in the pews. And now please enjoy this gift of music from John Hanson on piano. Thank you, John. And thanks to everyone for giving as you are able to support Westside and Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund. Your generosity of time, treasure, and presence are gifts that sustain us as a community. Each week, we come together as a congregation in as many ways that we can to connect and share that which matters most to us. So at this time, we make collective space for holding our joys and our sorrows. Larry Brennan is saddened to share the passing of his closest friend's father, Lou Hoffman. Larry was 12 when he first met Lou, and he has been a father figure ever since. Lou will be deeply missed. Let's hold Larry and the Hoffman family in our hearts. We know that on any Sunday, on any day, our lives and those who we love within this congregation, in our extended families and communities, are touched by times of celebration and crisis, by hard transitions and new horizons, by the intensity of medical treatments and immense joy with the restoration of health. So let us now, in a moment of silence, followed by music, hold in the tender vessel of our loving care all the joys and sorrows, both known and unknown, of our beloved community. Let us also extend our compassion to lift up and honor the lives of our neighbors and our wider community.
I invite you to remain in your seats while we sing There Is a Love.
For our time of meditation, please join me as we breathe together. Be comfortable in your body where you are, letting your feet ground you, letting your hands rest lightly. If you choose, close your eyes. Let's take 3 breaths together. And if you wish, keep your eyes closed and your body relaxed. As I offer this poem by Jean M. Olson, taken from her book called Becoming, a spiritual guide for navigating adulthood, written for young adults and all who live amid transitions and tensions. It's called Go Boldly. May you be brave enough to expose your aching woundedness and reveal your vulnerability. May you speak your deepest truths, knowing that they will change as you do. May you sing the music within you, composing your own melody, playing your song with all your heart. May you draw, paint, sculpt, and sew, showing the world your vision. May you write letters, poetry, biography, slogans, graffiti, the great novel, laying bare your words to love and hate. May you love even though your heart breaks again and again. And until the end of your days, may your life be filled with possibilities and courage. And now please join with Liz in singing, May I Be Filled with Loving Kindness. Lyrics on the screen.
Feel free to stay seated and let this just wash over you.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well.
And that was just gorgeous. And now, coming to us live is the Reverend Alex Jensen.
And there he is.
Welcome to Westside.
Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be joining you from Traverse City, Michigan. It's really good to be in company of some West Coast UUs again. I have a reading to start with. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from a TED Talk by the vulnerability researcher, Dr. Brené Brown, on the power of being vulnerable. It's a TED Talk that some of you might even be familiar with yourselves. She writes, "When you ask people about belonging, they'll tell you their most excruciating experiences of being excluded. And when you ask people about connection, the stories they'll tell you are about disconnection. I ran into this unnamed thing that absolutely unraveled connection in a way that I didn't understand or had never seen. And it turned out to be shame. And shame is really easily understood as the fear of disconnection. Is there something about me that if other people know it or see it, that I won't be worthy of connection? The things I can tell you about is it's universal. We all have it. The only people who don't experience shame have no capacity for human empathy or connection. No one wants to talk about it, and the less you talk about it, the more you have of it. What underpinned this shame is this I'm not good enough was excruciating vulnerability. This idea of in order for connection to happen, we have to allow ourselves to be seen, really seen. And you know how I feel about vulnerability. I hate vulnerability. So I could tell you a lot about shame. There's only one variable that separates the people who have a strong sense of love and belonging and the people who really struggle for it. The people who have a strong sense of love and belonging believe they're worthy of love and belonging. That's it. They believe they're worthy. And to me, the hard part of the one thing that keeps us out of connection is our fear that we're not worthy of connection. To let ourselves be seen, deeply seen, vulnerably seen, to love with our whole hearts, even though there's no guarantee, to practice gratitude and joy in those moments of terror when we're wondering, can I love you this much? Can I believe in this passionately? Can I be this fierce about this? Just to be able to stop and instead of catastrophizing what might happen, to say, I am just so grateful. Because to feel this vulnerable means I'm alive. We need to believe that we're enough, because when we work from a place that says I'm enough, then we stop screaming and start listening. We're kinder and gentler to the people around us, and we're kinder and gentler to ourselves. I wanted to start this sermon off by telling you about a part of myself that feels pretty vulnerable to talk about. I am really not that good at asking for help. Anyone else not good at asking for help? I imagine there are a few hands that could be raised in the sanctuary. For me, somewhere on my journey, I picked up the message that I had to be self-reliant, that the only person I should rely on is myself, and that I should do everything I can to make sure that I am not a burden on others. And while I'm aware of this tendency and pattern of mine to not want to reach out or to ask for help, and even though I've done a lot of work on myself to challenge and confront this, it is still something that I wrestle with. And here's how this played out recently in a way that feels a bit embarrassing to admit. For a long time, for maybe about a year, I didn't have a lot of furniture in my house. In fact, I had a house that was probably more than half empty. Yes, part of this was becoming a newly recovering graduate student, while also trying to furnish a full home for the first time. But underlying this issue was more than just the cost of furniture. In truth, I was ashamed of asking for help. I needed help, not just with picking up and moving furniture or with borrowing the help of someone's truck, also with even just searching for furniture. But to be honest, the pressure of all of this, the overwhelm that I needed to get on this, to find furniture that was affordable, sustainable, and could be moved all by myself, this was pretty debilitating. And you can also imagine how I didn't get very far with that needing to do it all by myself piece. What big furniture out there can a person move entirely on their own? I noticed myself avoiding this side of shame, of putting it off for later, for the future Alex to deal with. And it wasn't until I had a partner move in with me, my partner Connor, for about 2 years now, that things changed. Trust me, he had had enough of staring at an empty living room. As he lovingly, emphasis on lovingly, pushed me on some of this shame, I learned a lot more about the vulnerability involved in a loving relationship. How he knew this was a real challenge for me with asking for help, and really proved to me that he was someone I could rely on. That if I asked him for help, he would be there. That if I was going to be truly vulnerable in our relationship, I was going to need to learn to ask for help when I needed it. And so I'm proud to report now that our house is full, but this experience with confronting a real vulnerability of mine showed me just how hard being vulnerable can be at times, even as someone whose life and work seems steeped in vulnerability and having vulnerable conversations. As a minister, I really thought that I was an expert here. So beyond furniture and asking for help when we need it, we're delving into this wider theme of radical vulnerability, the ways that being vulnerable with one another and ourselves can be a truly radical act. Vulnerability itself is radical just in how it works. The root of the word vulnerable comes from the Latin word vulnerare, which is the verb to wound. Vulnerability is our ability to open ourselves up to the possibility of being wounded. It's stepping into a situation or a conversation and sharing of yourself in a way that you might actually get hurt, that there's a risk involved in vulnerability. The risk of what others might say or think, the risk of how we might hurt or feel, the complex mosaic of emotions we might be trying to hide from within ourselves or avoid from feeling at all costs. And yet, it's funny, what is something that we loathe to do ourselves is something that we as people unilaterally admire when we see others do it. While we find it so challenging to be vulnerable, we also find it brave, honest, and even moving when we experience others being vulnerable with us. Vulnerability is our ability to tolerate the potential for hurt and woundedness, and choosing to remain open to ourselves and to life, even when we do get hurt. This is really hard stuff, folks, especially if we in our lives have known great pain to the point where we've vowed to never let ourselves hurt like that again. That we won't allow for opportunities like that to hurt us or wound us because we've been hurt there before. To be vulnerable involves having a sense of faith and trust that our vulnerability is worth the wrestling. That our hurts and our pains actually show us more about ourselves, more than they show us about others. Being open and vulnerable is so hard. Though there's a major distinction between being what we call vulnerable and what we also might call being transparent. It's a helpful distinction in thinking about what it takes to truly be vulnerable with one another. There are ways that we can be transparent, where we can allow others to see into ourselves, our own inner workings, and to not feel vulnerable. It's challenging because transparency can sometimes look so close and a lot like vulnerability. But the difference is in the core aspect of what it takes to be vulnerable, that capacity of ours to be possibly hurt or wounded. When we are transparent, we're sharing from ourselves from a place of safety, perhaps even a place of comfort. We're showing people parts of our story that we've examined before, that we already know how to talk about or probably already have a pretty good handle on. Perhaps we've already told our story many, many times over, the pieces of pain or challenge in our past that have left scars but have ultimately healed over. Instead, vulnerability asks us to share from our wounds, not from our scars. It's a deeper sharing of ourselves that taps into the hurt, pain, and risk that we're too often afraid to share with others, that we're too often afraid to face ourselves. So one can be transparent, one can talk about their past, can even show parts of who they are and all those parts that have healed, parts that are even remarkable. But it's not vulnerability if there is no risk of hurt. Being vulnerable means we will possibly get hurt, and that is frightening. I want to turn to Dr. Brené Brown and her words for us on the power of vulnerability, how vulnerability itself is actually at the center of our meaningful human experiences. In our reading, Brené discusses this disconnective power that shame has over our lives, how what's really behind this shame is this idea that I'm not good enough. That vulnerability itself is painful and excruciating. She writes, in order for connection to happen, we have to allow ourselves to be seen, really seen. We have to confront our fear that we are not worthy of connection. When we are vulnerable, we are choosing to confront those inside voices that tell us it's not safe to be ourselves, that if we really let people in, we're going to be in for a world of hurt to follow. But when we flip the narrative, when we face those loud and powerful voices inside ourselves that say, it is not safe, what will they really think? Or, I just can't do that. We're opening ourselves up to liberation. We're opening our hearts to be truly compassionate and unfettered, and we make space for others to also do the same. In my case, in flipping the narrative that I really could ask for help, that I wouldn't be a burden, that I didn't have to do all this furniture moving all on my own, I found a deeper way into my relationship. I even surprised myself with the ways in which I had already thought I was a pro at being vulnerable. It turns out I've still got a lot to learn. What I found was that this vulnerability, even if it was scary or hard in the moment, it ultimately led to greater connection and love. What was this thing that I was so afraid of didn't have to be this unnamed shame and pain I felt around asking for help. Instead, I could own my story and own my vulnerability and remember that in the end, I was still worthy. In talking about vulnerability, there are times when it might not be safe or even okay for us to be vulnerable. There are some connections and relationships that, by their basis, are not vulnerable. For example, the relationships between doctors, patients, lawyers, and clients. There may be an appropriate transparency, but not a mutual sense of vulnerability. There are also times in our lives when others attempt to use or even abuse our empathy and our kindness, how some might take advantage of us opening up about our wounds and our hurts to stock up on painful words or ammunition for the future. When others manipulate and hurt us, it can be vulnerable to really name and hold to our boundaries what we will and will not accept about how we are treated. And despite this, I'd argue that being vulnerable is still the surprising position of power in the room. When we own our stories and recognize our wounds and our hurts, we take the power away from people to hurt us. When we name or call out that thing that we're too afraid people might see, we take back the power that we've given over to fear. So there may be times when being vulnerable isn't necessarily the best solution, when it may even cause us great harm. And yet vulnerability demands that we participate in it, even given these great risks and possible hurts. And by doing so, we actually leave the situation or conversation as the person with more power. We've owned that chapter of our story or that experience to the point where we get to share the narrative. There is just so much power in being truly vulnerable. I want to invite you to think about a concept that Brené names as being wholehearted. She uses this name for the kinds of people who don't shy away from vulnerability. Believe it or not, there are some people out there that aren't afraid to get vulnerable. Those that aren't afraid to dive into that site of discomfort and shame. Being wholehearted means telling our story with our whole heart, having the courage to be messy and imperfect, and allowing others to see us exactly as we are. Being wholehearted means having compassion for ourselves and for others, and it's about being willing to let go of who we think we should be and embracing who it is that we are. Vulnerability allows us to find connection, especially with the parts of ourselves that we are too often afraid to show. We need to be willing to be vulnerable with one another, to be open, even when there's no guarantee, to be the ones to say, I love you first, or to ask for help, or to say what we need, even when it's hard or challenging, or when we're not even sure how it will be received. We need to move past our shame and our fear of disconnection and move to a place that calls us into leading with our whole hearts. That's what being a part of a spiritual community truly calls us to do together. In Brené's book, Atlas of the Heart, a book that I really cannot recommend enough for all the research she puts behind the 87 emotions that we human beings experience across our lives, Brené speaks to this feeling of belonging and how this goes beyond simply just fitting in. In her words, true belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. What would happen if you were to share that small part of yourself that you've been too afraid to share at this table? What would it mean for you to be authentic and real about your sacred self with this community? To share those things that you're afraid others might find out about you? That you rock out to music and sing to yourself in the shower? That even as an adult, you're still afraid of the dark and go to bed with all the lights on? That you're a Christian, a theist, or that you pray or even speak in tongues, as well as diving deep into your spiritual life? That you too are too afraid to sometimes ask for help when you need it? What is getting in the way of you being fully here now? Of being your fullest self that you could bring? And ask yourself, if you can't be vulnerable here, in this community of care, deep listening, and mutual respect, where else can you be? I'll tell you what, I know that this would leaven and liven up the whole community if this is a place where we can truly bring all of ourselves here to this community. To close, I want to invite you to bring your fullest self here. I want to invite you to go beyond the surface with this community, to go into that scary territory of getting vulnerable, even if it's a bit risky. We have a faith here that teaches us that each one of us is loved and is worthy of connection and belonging. And there is no place for fear at this table over whether we'll be loved or fully accepted. The answer is simply yes. You can bring your fullest self here. Let yourself see and be seen. know and be known, and open your heart to feeling all of it. None of us can go beyond the surface, can go beyond being transparent with one another, if we aren't willing to take a risk on the path of more fully loving ourselves and our neighbors. We need to be brave to be real and authentic. We need to be open to our woundedness. And above all, your fragile, wounded, and hurting self is welcome here. And together, we collectively can make a space for those who most desperately need this community of love, connection, and belonging. And so, friends, let us endeavor to make that space together. And with that, I say, may it be so, and amen.
So wonderful to have Reverend Alex join us from afar. And so wonderful to have the technical ability to bring him and others to us. It enriches our community so much. And with that, I think we'll have another hymn.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit for number 95, There's More Love Somewhere.
Thank you. You may be seated. And thank you to Liz Bucklew, my partner in this service. Scott Farrell is on vacation. I think he went to the UU Musicians Conference, which will be exciting to hear about. And thank you as well to John and Marion and Ellen for her just beautiful, beautiful guitar work, all the wonderful music today. And in particular, I want to say Liz kind of grabbed some things by request. Reverend Alex suggested the Indie RE song, and I made a request for a hymn, and Liz just went with it, as she always does. Thank you. Deep thanks to Reverend Alex Jensen for being part of our community of worship this morning, bringing that inspiring message that we can take with us. And huge thanks to Henry in the AV booth for making this technical thing possible. As always, it is a pleasure and blessing to do this sacred work together. So Westside members, make sure to look at the Westside Week, which we'll have received on Friday, for details about ongoing activities at Westside, in person and online. It's summer, but there are still things going on, lots of things. In particular, make sure that you have Sunday, September 10th, noted on your calendar. That is the date of our in-gathering service and parking lot picnic. Details to follow. Our next worship service will be on August 13th, called Some Keep the Sabbath, with worship associate Rick Taylor, who is here, joined by other speakers from within the congregation, and music director Scott Farrell, sharing about everyday spiritual practices. Okay. And now please rise in body or spirit for our closing words and our parting. And I will draw from the words of Dr. Brené Brown that Reverend Alex cited, an excerpt from that. To let ourselves be seen, deeply seen, vulnerably seen. To love with our whole hearts, even though there's no guarantee. Just to be able to stop and say, I am so grateful, because to feel this vulnerable means I'm alive. So, I invite Amy to release our flame. And I want to say again, thank you to Amy for your wonderful reflection and the way that things intertwine, words and such. That's the magic here. So, as Amy releases our flame, may you go into this week blessed and blessing the world. We hold you in our love as you go. Now please, let's join together with Liz in singing Long Time Sun.
May the long time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide you all the way on. May the long time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide you all the way on. May the long time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide you all the way on. May the long time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide you all the way on.
Be safe, go in peace, enjoy this extraordinary summer. Stay out of the sun.